Welcome to this IELTS listening practice test. This test contains 40 questions divided into 4 sections and is designed to help you prepare for the IELTS listening exam. Please make sure you have your answer sheet, pen or pencil ready before the test begins. You will hear each recording once only. There will be time for you to read the questions before each section begins. The answers will be provided at the end of the complete test. Please follow the instructions carefully and write your answers. We wish you the very best of luck. You will hear a conversation between a woman and a volunteer coordinator at the City Environmental Volunteer Hub. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6.
Good morning, City Environmental Volunteer Hub. You're speaking with Oliver. How may I help you today?
Hi, I'd like to register as a volunteer, if that's possible.
Certainly. We're always looking for new volunteers. I'll just need to take a few details before I can register you.
Sure.
Let's begin with your full name.
It's Layla Marsden.
Sorry, was that Marston?
No, Marsden. That's Marsden.
Thank you. I've got Layla Marsden. And your address?
I live in flat 12B, Oakmere Court.
Moor Court?
No, Oakmere. That's Oakmere.
Right, Oakmere Court. And your postcode?
It's BHS4LP.
Let me read that back. BHS.
Sorry, it's BH7, not BHS.
Right, BH74LP. Great. What do you do for work?
I'm a laboratory technician.
A laboratory assistant?
Technician.
Right. Have you done any volunteering before?
Yes, although it was quite a while ago. I helped with a community recycling project organised by our local council.
Tree planting?
No, recycling.
Got it. And is there a particular day you'd usually be available?
Saturdays would be ideal, although if necessary I could occasionally do Sundays.
So I'll put Saturday as your preferred day.
Yes.
That is the end of questions 1 to 6. Now you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10.
Have you looked through our volunteer programs online?
I have, but there were so many that I wasn't sure which one would suit me.
That's understandable. Let's start with the Riverside Cleanup Program. It's one of our most popular activities.
Yes, I like the sound of that.
We meet at Riverside East Car Park at 7:30 every other Saturday.
Oh, that's actually the problem.
Too early?
No, it's the location. I don't drive and public transport doesn't really go there that early in the morning.
Ah, I see. Another option is our wildlife survey. That one involves identifying local bird and insect species.
I don't really have any experience with that.
That's perfectly fine, but there's quite a lot of training involved. The wetland monitoring group is similar.
Right.
However, native tree planting is much more suitable for beginners. We provide all the training on the day, so no previous experience is expected.
That sounds more like me. Do volunteers receive any benefits?
Yes, Everyone receives refreshments during activities. After your third project, you can borrow certain tools. But once you've completed 6 projects, you'll receive priority booking for our specialist conservation workshops.
Oh, that's useful.
Many people like that because places fill up quickly.
Is there anything I need to bring on my first day?
We provide gloves, safety equipment, and all the tools. You don't need identification unless you're under 18. The only thing I'd strongly recommend is bringing waterproof clothing, because the weather changes very quickly this time of year.
I'll remember that.
Excellent. We'll email all the remaining details this afternoon.
Thanks very much.
You're very welcome. We look forward to seeing you next Saturday.
That is the end of section 1. Now turn to section 2. You will hear a tour guide welcoming visitors to Greenford Heritage Park. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Greenford Heritage Park. My name's Hannah, and I'll be introducing you to the park before you begin exploring on your own. If this is your first visit, I hope you'll find today's information helpful, as there are a few things that have changed since the park reopened earlier this year. Some of you may have heard different stories about why the park was closed for several months. A number of local newspapers reported that heavy winter flooding had damaged several of the historic buildings, and although there was some minor water damage, that wasn't the main reason for the closure. Others believed we had discovered a rare species of wildlife and needed to restrict public access, but that wasn't the case either. In reality, the park was temporarily closed so that we could modernize a number of facilities, improve accessibility, and create better visitor services while carefully preserving the site's historical character. Before you start exploring, I'd strongly recommend beginning your visit at the Discovery Centre, which you'll find just inside the main entrance. Many people head straight for the cafe because it's one of the first buildings they notice, while others prefer to enter through the northern gate to avoid the crowds. However, spending just 10 minutes in the Discovery Centre will give you an excellent overview of the park's history, along with an interactive map that can help you plan the rest of your visit much more efficiently. One of our most popular attractions is the Glass House, which dates back to the late 19th century. Although the structure has recently undergone extensive restoration, we made every effort to preserve its original appearance. Some visitors assume the building itself was constructed using recycled materials during the renovation, but only a few replacement panels were produced that way. Others are surprised to learn that the Glass House is open throughout the day, rather than only during guided tours. What really makes it special is the remarkable collection of plants from a wide range of climates, allowing visitors to experience tropical, Mediterranean, and desert environments all under one roof. Before I move on, I'd also like to mention the Woodland Trail. If you've visited Greenford before, you'll probably remember that the original route ended near the old stone bridge. During the restoration project, we considered extending the trail into the eastern woodland, but after consulting local conservation groups, we decided against doing so. The path is fully open today and remains suitable for families with young children, although we do recommend wearing comfortable footwear because some sections can become slippery after rain. Finally, many visitors enjoy stopping at the Heritage Mill, which is one of the oldest surviving buildings in the park. Unlike a commercial mill, it no longer produces flour for local businesses, although it did many decades ago. For safety reasons, visitors aren't allowed to operate the machinery themselves. Instead, several experienced volunteers demonstrate how the equipment would have been used in the past, explaining both the engineering behind the mechanism and the important role the mill once played in the local community.
That is the end of questions 11 to 15. Now you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20.
Now that you've heard about the main attractions, I'd like to explain where you'll find some of the facilities that visitors ask about most often. If you have your map in front of you, this will be much easier to follow. We'll begin at the park entrance, which is where we're standing now. Walk straight ahead along the main path until you arrive at Central Square. This is the point from which most of the smaller paths branch off. Many families ask where they can stop for lunch. You might expect the picnic area to be beside the lake, but it isn't. Instead, continue north from Central Square, and you'll find it next to the visitor garden. There are plenty of benches there, and it's usually much quieter than the lakeside. If you've signed up for today's conservation activities, don't go to the Education Centre first. Although registration used to take place there, it's now handled elsewhere. Follow the path towards the outdoor theatre and you'll find the volunteer meeting point immediately beside it. Those of you who enjoy local history may be interested in the archaeology exhibition. Quite a few visitors assume it's located inside the Heritage Mill because both focus on the area's past. In fact, the exhibition occupies the ground floor of the Education Centre, where you'll also find interactive displays and short documentary films. For anyone planning to hire a boat this afternoon, continue beyond the outdoor theatre until you reach the lakeshore. The boat hire office is situated beside the lakeside deck. Please don't confuse it with the bird observation hide, which is a separate structure intended for watching wildlife and is closed to general visitors during nesting season. Finally, I'd like to point out the first aid station. Hopefully you won't need it, but it's useful to know where it is. Rather than being close to the entrance office, it's located adjacent to the glass house so that staff can respond quickly to incidents in the busiest part of the park. That brings us to the end of the orientation. Before you begin exploring, please remember to keep to the marked footpaths and dispose of any litter in the recycling bins provided throughout the park. On behalf of everyone at Greenford Heritage Park, thank you for visiting today, and we hope you enjoy your time here.
This is the end of section 2. You will now move on to section 3. You're about to hear a discussion between two postgraduate engineering students, Mia and Daniel, and their research supervisor, Dr. Carter. They are meeting to review the progress of a group project investigating energy-efficient urban transport systems. Now you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24.
Good afternoon, Mia. Good afternoon, Daniel. It's nice to see both of you again. I had a chance to go through the latest version of your project report over the weekend, and I must say you've both made solid progress since our last meeting.
That's good to hear. We were a little concerned because we made several changes after collecting the first batch of survey data, so we weren't sure whether we were moving in the right direction.
Yes, especially since we decided to narrow the scope. At first, we planned to investigate buses, private cars, shared bicycles, and electric scooters, all within the same project.
I remember, it was certainly ambitious.
Maybe a bit too ambitious.
Perhaps. One of the strengths of your revised proposal is that it's much more focused. Your original version wasn't lacking in enthusiasm, but it attempted to answer far too many different questions at once. By concentrating on commuter cycling and electric buses, you've given yourselves a much better chance of producing meaningful conclusions.
That was actually harder than we expected. Every time we removed one topic, another one seemed equally important.
That's perfectly normal. Research isn't about including everything you find interesting. It's about identifying one clear question and gathering enough evidence to answer it convincingly.
We also updated quite a few of our references after your comments.
Yes, I noticed. The literature you've included now is much more current. There were only 1 or 2 older papers that I thought could probably be replaced, but that wasn't the biggest issue in the earlier draft.
That's reassuring.
Now let's talk about your questionnaire. Overall, I think you've designed it well. The questions are straightforward, and respondents seem to have understood them without much difficulty.
We had over 200 responses in the end.
That's a respectable number. However, I'm not particularly worried about increasing the sample size.
Really? We thought collecting another 100 responses might strengthen the project.
Only if those responses improve the quality of your evidence. At the moment, nearly all of your participants come from the western side of the city. That means your findings may not accurately represent travel patterns elsewhere.
So you're suggesting we collect data from different neighborhoods?
Exactly. Broadening the geographical coverage will make your conclusions much more dependable. It's not simply about having more questionnaires, it's about ensuring your data reflects a wider range of commuters.
That makes sense. We focused on locations that were easy to reach from campus, which probably explains the imbalance.
And that's a common mistake in student research. Fortunately, it's one that's relatively easy to correct before your final submission. Let's move on to the field observations. I read the notes you both submitted, and overall they were very detailed. Mia, I believe you were responsible for recording cyclist behavior at the 3 observation sites?
Yes. We originally selected 4 locations, but one of them became inaccessible during the second week because road maintenance work started much earlier than expected. We had to replace it with another junction nearby.
Did that affect the consistency of your observations?
Only slightly. The replacement site had a similar traffic pattern, although we had to spend an extra day collecting data to make sure the results were comparable.
At first, we considered excluding those observations altogether, but after comparing the figures, we realized the differences were fairly small.
I think that was the right decision. Sometimes students assume any unexpected change automatically invalidates their data, but that's not necessarily true if the reasoning is well explained.
That was our concern. We wanted to be transparent, rather than pretending everything had gone exactly as planned.
And that's exactly what good research requires. Daniel, I'd also like to hear more about the simulation model you used.
Of course. Once we'd entered the survey responses and observation data, we built several traffic scenarios using the software. Initially, I expected it to produce more accurate traffic counts than our manual observations, but that wasn't really its biggest advantage.
No?
Not really. What it actually helped with was processing a large amount of information much more efficiently. Instead of calculating every possible scenario ourselves, the software generated comparisons in a matter of minutes.
That saved us an incredible amount of time. We still checked the outputs manually, of course, but the initial analysis was much quicker than we expected.
That's an important distinction. Software should support your analysis, not replace your judgment. Did you encounter any technical problems?
Nothing major. We made a few input errors at the beginning, but once we'd corrected those, the program ran smoothly.
Excellent. Be sure to mention that in your methodology. Readers appreciate knowing how you dealt with practical issues rather than assuming the process was perfect.
We'll include a short section explaining that. We kept a record of every adjustment we made during the modelling stage.
Very good. That level of documentation will strengthen the credibility of your findings.
That is the end of questions 21 to 24. Now you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30.
Now let's go through the remaining sections of your report one by one so that you know exactly what needs attention before the final submission. Let's begin with the literature review. Overall, it's well organized and you've drawn on a good range of academic sources. However, I think one area could be developed further.
Is that the section comparing different transport policies?
Exactly. At the moment, you've explained what previous researchers found, but you haven't really connected those findings to your own project. I'd like to see a little more evidence there before you finalize it.
So, rather than rewriting the whole section, we should strengthen the discussion.
Yes, expand it, don't replace it. A few carefully chosen studies should be enough.
What about the questionnaire? We made several revisions after the pilot study.
I noticed. The wording is much clearer now. I only have a handful of minor suggestions, nothing substantial, but I think it's worth making those final adjustments before you submit the appendix.
We'll update it this afternoon.
Now, regarding the simulation model, I was impressed. Your explanation is concise, and the assumptions you've made are clearly stated.
That's good to hear. I wasn't sure whether we needed to add another technical section.
No, I don't think that's necessary. In my opinion, that part is already working well. I wouldn't change it.
That's one less thing to worry about.
The cost analysis, however, could benefit from a broader perspective.
Do you mean comparing different transport options?
Partly, but I was actually thinking internationally. You focused entirely on local data, which is understandable, but including one or two examples from overseas would help readers see whether your findings reflect wider trends.
We found a recent study from Copenhagen that might fit quite well.
That sounds promising. Use it if the comparison is meaningful. Let's move on to the environmental impact assessment.
That section took longer than we expected because there were several ways of estimating emissions.
I can imagine. Fortunately, I don't think major changes are needed. Most of my comments are simply about presentation rather than content.
So we don't need to collect any additional environmental data?
No. I'd simply revise the section using the comments I've written in the margin. Once you've done that, it should be ready. Finally, let's talk about your presentation.
We've already drafted the slides, although they're still fairly basic.
That's perfectly fine at this stage. My suggestion is that you arrange a short practice session with another research group before the assessment. They'll probably notice points that the three of us have overlooked.
That's a good idea. Fresh feedback is always useful.
I'll contact the Sustainable Engineering Group this afternoon and see if they're available next week.
Excellent. That should give you enough time to make any final improvements.
Thank you for all the feedback. It's encouraging to know we're on the right track.
Yes, especially after narrowing the project. We weren't completely sure we'd made the right decision.
You did. Remember, a focused project supported by reliable evidence is almost always stronger than one that tries to answer every possible question. I'm looking forward to reading the final version.
We'll send you the revised report by next Friday.
Perfect. If any issues come up before then, just send me an email.
That is the end of Section 3. You will now move on to Section 4. You are about to hear part of a university lecture on smart cities and urban mobility. You have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today's lecture explores how advances in digital technology are changing the way cities manage transportation. Over the last 2 decades, urban populations have grown at an unprecedented rate. While this growth has brought economic opportunities, it has also placed considerable pressure on transport networks. Congested roads, longer commuting times, and increasing levels of air pollution have encouraged governments to rethink how cities are planned and managed. Before examining today's smart transport systems, it's useful to consider how traffic management worked in the past. Until relatively recently, transport authorities depended largely on manual observations. Staff were often sent to busy intersections to count vehicles at different times of the day, recording the information on paper before transferring it into reports. Although this approach provided a general picture of traffic conditions, it could only capture what happened during a limited period. Unexpected events occurring later in the week frequently went unnoticed. In addition to these observations, many planning decisions relied on large-scale surveys conducted every few years. Residents were asked how they travelled to work, which routes they preferred, and how long their journeys usually took. These surveys offered valuable insights, but by the time the information had been analysed, travel patterns had often changed considerably. As a result, infrastructure projects were sometimes based on information that no longer reflected the city's actual needs. One of the greatest limitations of traditional planning was its inability to respond quickly. Road conditions can change within minutes because of accidents, severe weather, or public events. Yet older systems simply weren't designed to adapt to these rapid changes. This situation began to change with the introduction of digital technologies. Across many modern cities, thousands of electronic sensors are now installed beneath roads, alongside traffic signals, and even on public transport vehicles. Unlike manual counting methods, these devices collect continuous data throughout the day and night. Engineers can therefore observe how traffic volumes change from one hour to the next, instead of relying on occasional measurements. However, gathering information is only the first step. The real challenge lies in interpreting these enormous quantities of data quickly enough to support effective decision-making. This is where artificial intelligence has become increasingly valuable. Rather than simply reporting congestion after it occurs, modern computer systems analyze traffic patterns continuously and are often able to identify developing patterns that suggest delays are likely before drivers experience significant disruption. Of course, these predictions are never perfect. Human behavior remains difficult to model completely, particularly during unexpected situations. Nevertheless, forecasting systems have improved substantially over the past decade and now allow transport authorities to respond far more rapidly than was previously possible. Another important application involves public transport. Live information from buses, trains, and trams enables operators to adjust service frequency whenever passenger demand changes unexpectedly. During large sporting events, concerts, or severe weather, additional services can often be introduced with much shorter notice than in the past. This not only reduces waiting times, but also encourages more people to choose public transport instead of private vehicles. Although the advantages of smart transport systems are often highlighted, it is equally important to recognize the challenges involved in introducing them. One of the most frequently discussed concerns relates to data security. Modern transport networks generate enormous amounts of information every day. While much of this data is anonymous, some systems collect details that could potentially be linked to individual travel behavior. For this reason, cities must invest in reliable methods of protecting digital information. Public confidence depends not only on technological innovation, but also on responsible data management. Another issue is the cost of implementation. Installing intelligent traffic signals, roadside sensors, and communication networks requires substantial investment. This can be particularly difficult for older cities, where much of the existing infrastructure was never designed to support modern digital technologies. In many cases, authorities have to decide whether to replace entire systems or gradually upgrade them over several years. A further challenge concerns compatibility. Different manufacturers often develop equipment using different technical standards. If these systems cannot communicate effectively with one another, the overall network becomes less efficient. Engineers therefore place considerable emphasis on ensuring that new technologies can operate alongside existing equipment without creating unnecessary complexity. Technology alone, however, is not enough to guarantee success. Public acceptance plays an equally significant role. Even the most advanced transport system is unlikely to achieve its objectives if residents do not understand how it works or why changes are being introduced. For that reason, governments increasingly develop clear policies explaining how information will be collected, how it will be used, and what safeguards are in place. Open communication helps reduce misunderstanding and encourages greater public trust. Finally, it is worth remembering that smart transport systems are not projects that end once the equipment has been installed. They require continuous maintenance. Sensors need regular inspection, software must be updated to address security risks, and communication networks have to be monitored to ensure they remain reliable. Without ongoing maintenance, even the most sophisticated system will gradually become less effective. Looking ahead, researchers believe that future transport networks will become increasingly connected. Advances in artificial intelligence, vehicle communication systems, and environmental monitoring are expected to make cities safer, cleaner, and more efficient. However, successful urban mobility will continue to depend on balancing technological innovation with careful planning, responsible governance, and the needs of the people who use these systems every day. Before our next lecture, I'd like you to think about one question. As technology becomes more capable of managing transport automatically, what responsibilities should remain with human planners? We'll begin next week's session by discussing your ideas before examining several international case studies. Thank you for your attention.